Beneath a city bridge, a homeless boy lived alone, with nothing but his rickety pushcart. One night, he heard the faint cries of a pregnant woman coming from a stalled luxury car. Without hesitation, he broke the window, pulled her out, and pushed her to the hospital using his cart. The woman survived and gave birth. What the boy didn't know was that the woman he had just saved was the wife of a billionaire. His selfless act would open a new door in his life he never imagined. Before we dive in this story, let us know where you're watching from. We love to hear your thoughts. The wind howled beneath the overpass, weaving through rusted beams and broken bottles like a ghost with no home. It was the kind of cold that didn't just bite skin, it settled into bones, quiet and permanent. Beneath that stretch of crumbling freeway just past the faded graffiti and soaked cardboard shanties, a boy lay curled inside the mouth of a massive drainage pipe. His name was Khalil. At 15, Khalil had already memorized the silence of the city at night, the kind that came after the last bus groaned past, after even the sirens quieted down. He knew which streetlights flickered, which dumpsters weren't locked, which alley cats could be trusted not to steal from him. Wrapped in a patchwork blanket he had found months ago, layered over an old hoodie and jeans stiff with grime, he stared at the ceiling of his concrete shelter, letting his breath fog the air like smoke from a fire he couldn't afford. Next to him was his most valuable possession, a homemade cart pieced together from shopping trolley wheels, plywood, and a bungee cord. By day it hauled scrap metal and recyclables. By night it was his pillow, his table, his shield. He had named it Faith, though no one knew that but him. Once, not long ago, Khalil had a room. It wasn't much, but it had a door and a mother who hummed gospel songs while folding laundry. But cancer doesn't wait for hope, and poverty doesn't wait for children to grow up. After she died, his father, already broken by the weight of false accusations and an unjust system, was taken away, and Khalil slipped through the cracks like a name no one remembered to call during roll. He never begged, never asked for more than what he could trade or earn. There was a kind of pride in that, a quiet, stubborn pride that kept him upright even when the city bent its back to crush him. He had learned to keep his head down, eyes sharp, heart guarded. The world didn't offer safety to boys like him, not unless they fought for it, or vanished. That night, as the wind screamed past the concrete pillars and the stars blinked behind a haze of pollution, Khalil clutched his knees to his chest and tried to forget the numbness in his toes. He had eaten half a granola bar that morning and sipped water from a cracked thermos he'd filled at a public park fountain. Hunger was familiar, so was cold. Loneliness, too. But none of those things scared him anymore. What did scare him, though he'd never admit it, was the idea that this might be all there was, that no one would ever see him for more than the dirt on his face or the shopping cart he pulled, that he would stay beneath bridges and behind shadows, as invisible as the cracks in the sidewalk. He rubbed his hands together for warmth, knuckles scabbed from a fall 2 days ago, and stared into the dark like it might offer an answer. The silence was deep, absolute, but not for long. Because in the next hour the city would whisper a name it hadn't said in years, and under this bridge, where the forgotten slept and the wind carried secrets, Khalil would make a choice that would change everything. Not because someone asked him to, not because someone promised him anything, but because even when the world turns its back, some hearts keep burning, even in the cold, even in the dark. The sound reached Khalil like a thread pulled taut in the night, faint, trembling, almost drowned by the groan of a passing truck above. He froze. It wasn't the scurrying of rats or the guttural growl of distant engines, nor the drunken ramblings he sometimes heard from nearby alleys. No, this was something else. It was human. Desperate. A low moan, followed by a sharp intake of breath that cut through the stillness like a blade. Khalil sat upright, instinct overriding fatigue. He crawled out of the drainage pipe, his breath puffing white in the air, and scanned the shadows beyond the overpass. For a moment there was only the dull hum of the city beyond, the glint of headlights from a freeway curve, the flash of neon far in the distance. Then he heard it again. A voice. Weak, strained, like someone trying not to scream. He grabbed his flashlight from under a crate, smacked it twice until it flickered to life, and followed the sound down the embankment past rusting fencing and old tires. The voice grew louder, raw with pain. It led him to a narrow service road, forgotten by the city, lined with chain-link fences and broken glass. And there, nestled awkwardly in the dip of a shallow ditch, was a sleek silver car. Its headlights dim, its engine lifeless, a Mercedes maybe, or something like it, the kind of car Khalil had only seen on billboards or passing too fast for faces. The driver's window was fogged from the inside, but he could make out the silhouette of a woman slumped over the steering wheel, one arm gripping the side door, the other wrapped tightly around her belly. Her mouth was open, teeth clenched, eyes wide with pain. Her dress, dark blue, elegant, was soaked with sweat. Khalil stepped closer, flashlight trembling in his grip. "Ma'am?" he called, voice cautious but clear. No response. He rapped on the glass. She flinched, turning her face slowly toward him, lips parted as if to speak, but only a whimper escaped. Her skin was pale, flushed with heat. She looked like she hadn't moved in hours. He circled the car, tried the door, locked. He knocked again, harder this time. "Hey, are you okay?" he asked, louder now. Still no words, just a strained gasp and a sudden contraction that made her entire body seize. Her eyes rolled back. Khalil panicked, heart hammering. He looked up and down the road. No cars, no people. No one was coming. The window. He didn't want to break it. But the woman was in labor, alone, trapped. The frost on the glass told him the heater wasn't working, and the faint steam rising off her skin told him her body was overheating. He stepped back, pulled a rusted tire iron from his cart, wrapped it in his hoodie sleeve to cushion the blow, then struck the side window near the edge, once, twice, until it spiderwebbed and gave way with a dull pop. Shards rained into the seat, and the woman barely reacted. She was past fear now, past protest. Her world had narrowed to the pain and the terror pressing against her from the inside. Carefully, Khalil reached through the shattered window, unlocked the door, and opened it. The woman sagged toward him, whispering something he couldn't understand. Up close he could see her face. She was in her early 30s, maybe younger, beautiful in a way that only made the situation feel more surreal. Her lipstick had faded. Her earrings had fallen somewhere into the floor mat, and her purse had spilled open with a silver phone blinking out of battery on the passenger seat. Khalil didn't ask questions. He didn't waste time. He pulled the hoodie from his arms, wrapped it around her shoulders, then wedged his shoulder under her arm and gently lifted her out of the car. She screamed, short, hoarse, but didn't resist. Her legs barely moved. Every step was a war. He led her to his cart, the rickety frame groaning under the sudden weight. He had never pushed it with a human life inside, never imagined it would carry anything more than cans and scrap, but tonight it would carry someone who still had time left. Someone who had someone else waiting to be born. He wrapped the blanket around her, tied it down with old cords, and gripped the handlebar tight. Then, without thinking twice, Khalil ran. The city didn't notice him, just another shadow against the walls, just another wheeled silhouette under flickering streetlights. But Khalil's muscles burned, his breath turned to smoke, his feet slapped pavement with desperate rhythm. Behind him, the car's hazard lights blinked in silence. Ahead of him, the hospital was at least 12 blocks away. He didn't know if he would make it in time. He only knew that no one else was coming, and that if anyone was going to fight for this woman and the child clawing their way into the world, it had to be him. Khalil's legs screamed with every stride, the cold night air cutting at his throat, but he didn't slow down. The wheels of his makeshift cart wobbled over potholes and cracked sidewalks, each bump jostling the woman beneath the blanket, yet she never cried out again. Her breaths came in shallow, broken rhythms, lips pressed tight, face pale and contorted. He could hear her murmuring now, something about the baby, something about not being ready, about not being alone. But she was alone. They both were. No headlights, no bystanders, no sirens. Just the sound of rubber wheels scraping concrete and a boy who had no business carrying the weight of another life, but did it anyway, because no one else would. He turned down an alley to cut time, dodging puddles and piles of old furniture, the cart rattling violently with every twist. A dog barked somewhere in the distance, and lights flickered from the upper floors of apartments that might as well have been galaxies away. He passed shuttered stores, locked gates, a glowing, open 24 hours sign in the window of a corner store that he didn't dare stop at. His eyes stayed fixed ahead toward the distant blue-white glow that marked the hospital. 12 blocks, then 10, then 8, and still the woman whispered in fragments, "He's coming. Hurts so much, please. Help." Khalil gritted his teeth and pushed harder. His chest burned. His fingers had gone numb on the metal handle. His breath came in short, ragged bursts, but he kept going. At one point she screamed again, a sharp animal sound that echoed off the walls like a fire alarm. He nearly lost control of the cart but steadied it just in time, whispering, "Almost there, just hold on," though he didn't know if she even heard him. Blood. He saw it now, dark and pooling beneath her legs, seeping through the blanket. Panic surged in his gut like a wave. He pushed faster, harder. The cart bounced over the lip of the curb, nearly tipping, and he caught it with his whole body, knees scraping the asphalt as he kept it upright. The hospital came into view like a mirage. White lights, motionless glass doors, a red cross that never looked more like salvation. But it wasn't over yet. The emergency entrance was at the far end, past the parking structure and loading dock. Khalil didn't stop to yell. He didn't wave his arms or hope someone saw him from a window. He ran straight for the sliding doors, yanked the cart up the ramp, and banged on the glass with both fists until it trembled. A nurse appeared, startled, then confused. She saw the boy first, disheveled, wild-eyed, wrapped in dirt and desperation. Then she saw the woman. Everything changed in an instant. The doors hissed open, voices shouted behind them. A team in scrubs poured out like a wave. A stretcher rolled forward, hands reaching, orders shouted over radios. "She's crowning," one yelled. "BP dropping," another called. Khalil stumbled back, heart pounding, as they lifted the woman from the cart with precision and urgency. The blanket fell away. More blood. The nurse looked at Khalil, ready to ask questions, but stopped when she saw his face. Too young to be so empty, too old to be this invisible. "Where did she come from?" someone asked. "Did he do this?" "No," the nurse said firmly. "He brought her." Khalil couldn't breathe. He leaned against the wall, sweat freezing against his neck, legs trembling. His cart sat abandoned, the wheel still spinning, a smear of blood across the plywood. He didn't know if she would make it. He didn't know if he would be blamed, arrested, forgotten. All he knew was that he'd gotten her here, that somehow, against everything the world had put in his way, he had delivered a stranger through the cold and the dark and the silence, and into a place where someone else might finally care. He slid down the wall until he was sitting on the cold tile floor just inside the doors, watching as the team disappeared with her into the bright depths of the ER. Her moans echoed faintly behind them, then vanished, and for the first time that night, there was nothing left for him to do. The fluorescent lights inside the hospital burned too bright, buzzing faintly like a swarm of insects. Khalil squinted against them, his body sagging as the adrenaline began to drain from his veins. He sat slumped just beyond the threshold, shoulders pressed to the wall, legs stretched out across the tile like he couldn't remember how to hold them up anymore. Nurses moved around him like currents in a river, avoiding eye contact but whispering when they passed. His cart sat a few feet away, forgotten in the corner, blood still drying on its wooden base, one wheel stubbornly clicking every time it shifted. Minutes passed, or maybe hours. Khalil couldn't tell. He didn't ask questions, didn't call out. He wasn't sure he had the strength. All he could do was stare at the hallway where they had taken her. The woman he didn't know, whose name he still didn't have, but whose life now felt tethered to his like two boats lashed together in a storm. He wiped his hands on his jeans, leaving faint smears of rust-colored blood across the knees. His fingers trembled, not from fear or cold this time, but from the unfamiliar ache of not knowing what came next. A man approached. Security. Broad shoulders, dark uniform, skeptical eyes. "Hey, kid," he said, low and clipped. "You brought her in?" Khalil nodded once. "Name?" The boy opened his mouth but hesitated. He didn't want trouble, didn't want more questions, but lying would only make it worse. "Khalil," he said softly. "That's it?" the guard pressed. Khalil nodded again. The man eyed him, then glanced at the cart. "You related to her?" Khalil shook his head. "She was in a car. It wasn't running. She couldn't move." He didn't elaborate. He didn't mention the broken glass or the screaming or the blood, just the facts, just what mattered. The guard stared at him a beat longer than necessary, then muttered something into the walkie clipped to his shoulder and walked off without a word. Another woman approached this time, wearing teal scrubs and a tired smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. She knelt beside Khalil, her voice gentler than the last. "You okay, honey?" He nodded, though his body said otherwise. "You hungry? Thirsty?" Again he nodded, this time to both. She handed him a bottle of water and a package of crackers. His fingers fumbled with the wrapper as she sat beside him, her knees creaking as they hit the floor. "What's your last name, Khalil?" she asked. "Where can we call?" He hesitated, chewing slowly, buying time. "I don't have anyone," he mumbled. "No family?" she asked gently. He shook his head. "Not anymore." There was a silence between them, filled only by the buzz of lights and the distant beeping of machines down the hall. Then the ER doors burst open and a nurse rushed through, clipboard in hand, calling for an attending. Khalil watched as she disappeared, his chest tightening. "She's going to be okay," the woman beside him said, as if reading his mind. "The doctors are doing everything they can." More footsteps, more motion, then finally a voice came from the corridor, calm but loud. "We've got a pulse on the baby, she's stabilizing, let's move her to OB." The tension in Khalil's chest loosened just slightly, like a belt being unclasped after hours of pressure. She wasn't gone. Not yet. The woman in scrubs touched his shoulder gently. "You saved her, you know that?" Khalil didn't answer. He didn't nod. He just stared straight ahead, eyes glazed with something too complex for his age. Gratitude, fear, disbelief, maybe all of it. Then, without another word, he stood, grabbed the handle of his cart, and turned toward the glass doors. They hissed open at his approach, letting in a gust of cold air that lifted the hem of his hoodie and scattered a few loose crumbs from the crackers still in his hand. He didn't look back. He didn't wait for applause, for recognition, for a thank you that might never come. He stepped into the night, swallowed once more by the silence he knew too well, the kind of silence only a city can offer to the ones it never meant to see. The morning broke slow and gray, the kind of light that made the city feel quieter than it really was. Inside the hospital, tucked into a private recovery room on the 3rd floor, Rachel Whitmore opened her eyes to a world she barely recognized. The antiseptic air, the faint hum of machines, the soft rustle of curtains being drawn. It all collided with the last shards of memory she had before blacking out. The car, the freezing air, the pain-like fire blooming in her spine, and then a face. A boy's face, young, dark, afraid but steady. There had been blood, a voice calling her name though she'd never given it, and then movement. Cold wind in her hair, the creak of wheels beneath her, the clatter of footsteps pounding the pavement like a heartbeat. She turned her head slowly, wincing. The ivy tugged at her skin. In the bassinet beside her, a newborn slept beneath a knitted blue blanket, impossibly small and impossibly real. She blinked at him, tears gathering before she could stop them. He was here, alive, somehow. The nurse who entered a few minutes later confirmed it all. There had been complications, but both mother and child were stable now. It had been close, the nurse said, too close. If she'd arrived 10 minutes later, they might not have been able to save either of them. Rachel listened, silent, her hand resting protectively on her stomach even though it was already flat, empty. But her mind wasn't on the nurse, or the machines, or even the baby. It was on him, the boy. The one who'd found her, the one who broke the window, pulled her out, dragged her through the night like he owed her something, even though she knew he didn't. She asked the nurse immediately, where was he? Had anyone spoken to him? Did they know his name? The nurse hesitated, confused. He didn't stay long, she said. Didn't leave a number, just a first name, Khalil. The name rang through Rachel's mind like a bell, not because she knew him, but because somehow it felt like she should have. She was Rachel Whitmore, wife of Jack Whitmore, billionaire real estate mogul, head of the Whitmore Foundation, face of countless philanthropic campaigns that smiled down from subway billboards. She gave speeches about change, about caring for the forgotten, yet when the moment came, it wasn't policy or privilege that saved her. It was a kid in the shadows with nothing in his pockets but nerve and instinct. It was a child the world had discarded. Later that day, Jack arrived. He moved through the hospital like a force of nature, tall, commanding, immaculately dressed in a suit even now. His face paled when he saw Rachel, and for a moment the arrogance slipped. He rushed to her side, kissed her forehead, looked at the baby with something close to awe. But when she told him what had happened, every detail she could recall between the contractions and the chaos, his expression shifted. He straightened. "Who is this boy?" he asked. "Security said he left before they got his full name." Rachel shook her head. "He said Khalil. That's all I know." Jack stepped into motion like a man preparing for war. He pulled out his phone, called their publicist, their foundation manager, their driver. Within the hour, a press release had been drafted. Within the next, a team had been deployed to track down Khalil through hospital security footage, street cameras, local shelters. Rachel didn't object. She wanted to find him too. But not to offer money, not to pat him on the head and say well done like he was some good dog. She wanted to look him in the eyes and say thank you, a real thank you, the kind that didn't come wrapped in charity or headlines. She wanted to know how someone with so little had given so much. News outlets caught wind before long. A heroic teen had rescued a prominent philanthropist and her newborn from near death, then vanished without a trace. Speculation ran wild. Talk shows buzzed. Some painted him a saint, others a hoax. But the image was real. A still frame from a security camera outside the ER. A boy, thin, hooded, pushing a cart like his life depended on it. Eyes locked ahead, as if nothing else existed but the woman bleeding behind him and the doors that might not open fast enough. Rachel stared at that photo for hours, her baby sleeping beside her, Jack making calls in the other room. "We owe him everything," she whispered. Not to Jack, not to the cameras, but to herself. And in that moment she made a vow. Not the performative kind, not the kind that disappears once the headlines fade. She vowed to find Khalil. Not to rescue him, not to fix him, but to see him, fully, truthfully, the way he had seen her that night. A human being in need, and worth saving. They found him 3 days later, not through police records or shelters or official databases. Because Khalil didn't belong to any of those. He was the kind of boy who didn't leave footprints where he walked. But someone had seen the photo, an old man who collected bottles near the same stretch of freeway every morning. He recognized the cart, not the face. "Kid keeps to himself," he told the volunteers. "Got this limp on the right side, always patches up the wheels with duct tape, kind of cart you remember." And that was enough. Rachel arrived just after sunset. She insisted on going herself, not sending handlers or security or anyone with a clipboard and a smile. She wore no makeup, dressed in jeans and a coat too big for her, hair pulled back, expression calm but locked in purpose. The SUV eased off the service road, tires crunching over gravel and broken glass, headlights cutting across the columns of the overpass where the wind howled through like it always did, and there he was. Khalil stood behind a trash bin, sorting cans into a plastic sack, his back turned, unaware that the world was moving toward him. When the engine stopped and the door opened, he froze, head lifting slightly like a deer in the woods. He turned slowly, his eyes met hers. For a moment, neither spoke. Rachel stepped forward, carefully, like she knew any wrong move might send him running. She didn't bring a camera crew, no news vans, no grand gestures, just her and a baby wrapped in her arms, a quiet bundle of new life swaddled in soft cotton, breathing gently against her chest. "You remember me?" she asked. Her voice was softer than he expected, not like the voices that usually reached him, stern, skeptical, or afraid. This one carried weight but not threat. Khalil nodded once, lips parting, unsure whether to speak. "You saved us," she said. "Me and him. She tilted her chin toward the child. His name's Ili. Khalil looked down at the baby, then back up, the lines of suspicion still etched across his face, but something loosened in his shoulders. You okay? He asked, voice rough like it hadn't been used in days. Rachel smiled, not the practiced kind, but the kind that cracked something real. We are. Because of you. He shifted, unsure what to do with his hands, glancing toward the cart, the only thing that had never let him down. I didn't do it for... He started, but she shook her head. I know. You didn't do it for thanks, or money, or a headline. That's why it matters. From the SUV, the driver stepped out and opened the trunk. Inside were 2 large duffel bags and a sealed envelope. Rachel didn't look at them. She looked only at Khalil. I want to help you, she said. Not because you saved my life, but because you matter, and you deserve more than this. She gestured gently at the cold cement, the rattling cart, the blanket he had tied into a crude bed. Khalil stared at her. Long. Searching. For lies. For traps. For the kind of kindness that comes with strings you don't see until you're tangled. But he didn't find them. Just her. Just a woman who had nearly died, who now stood in the place he slept, holding a child she wouldn't have known without him. I don't want your money, he said at last. I don't need to be saved. Rachel nodded, the wind tugging at her coat. I'm not offering to save you, she said. I'm offering to stand beside you, to open a door, not drag you through it. There was a silence between them, filled with everything neither of them had the words to say. Then Khalil did something he hadn't done in months, maybe longer. He stepped forward. Not all the way, not into the car, not into her world, but close enough to look down at the baby again, whose tiny fist was curled around a piece of blanket. He's strong, Khalil said. So are you, Rachel replied. They didn't hug. They didn't cry. But something passed between them. Something neither the news nor the money nor the public could ever truly touch. It was the recognition of truth. The kind of truth that didn't need to be polished or sold. The kind of truth that changes people, if they let it. Rachel handed him the envelope. Inside is an address, a place to sleep, food, clothes, school if you want it. No contracts, no obligations, just a door. You decide if you want to walk through. Khalil didn't take it right away. He looked at her one last time, trying to see if she would flinch, if the look in her eyes would change, now that she'd made her offer. But it didn't. And so, finally, he reached out, took it, and nodded once. Rachel turned back toward the car, baby tucked close, and Khalil stood beneath the bridge that had once felt like a home and now, just maybe, looked a little more like a past. 1 year later, the city looked different. Not because the skyline had changed, or the streets had grown cleaner or quieter, those things rarely happened all at once, but because a story had taken root in its concrete. A story people kept telling even after the headlines faded. And at the center of that story stood a boy in a navy blazer, too big for his frame, standing behind a podium in front of a crowd that had never seen him before, but already believed they knew who he was. Cameras clicked. Phones lifted. The gold seal of the mayor's office gleamed behind him. And Khalil, 15 years old and still learning how to live above ground, cleared his throat in a room full of people waiting to hear the sound of his voice. He glanced down at the note cards someone had printed for him, stiff and white, sitting like strangers in his hands. He could read them, could say all the right words. But when he looked up, saw Rachel standing in the front row with baby Eli on her hip and a quiet, tearful smile on her face, he set the cards aside and just spoke. I don't think I'm a hero, he began, voice low but steady. I think I was scared, cold, tired, and I saw someone who needed help. That's it. That's all it was. I didn't know her name. I didn't know her husband was famous. I didn't even know if the hospital would let us through the door. But I knew what it looked like when someone was in pain. And I knew what it felt like when no one showed up. So I showed up. A hush fell over the room, the kind that stretches wide and deep because nobody wanted to miss a single word. Khalil shifted his weight, gripped the sides of the podium. I used to live under a bridge. I had a cart, a blanket, and no reason to believe anyone would ever notice me. Not unless I was in the way, not unless I did something wrong. But that night, something right happened, and now I'm standing here, in this jacket, in this school, in this life, and sometimes I still wonder if it's really mine. There were murmurs in the back. A few people dabbed their eyes. A man from the city council leaned forward, hands folded, gaze unwavering. Khalil took a breath. They say what I did was brave. But you want to know the truth? It wasn't bravery. It was instinct. It was kindness. And kindness isn't some big dramatic thing. It's just a choice. A decision you make in the moment when nobody's watching, and nobody's paying you, and nobody's going to put your name in lights. He paused, looked out over the crowd, past the banners, the suits, the gold lettering on the wall. I'm not special. I'm not different. I was just given a chance. A door opened. I stepped through. That's it. But there are a lot of kids still out there who haven't found that door, kids who are smart and strong and quiet and tired, kids who would carry the whole world on their back if someone would just look them in the eye and tell them they matter. The applause didn't erupt. It unfolded, slow and full, rising like something sacred. Rachel pressed her hand over her heart. Eli cooed softly in her arms, eyes wide and curious. Khalil nodded once, stepped back from the mic, and let the moment land the way it needed to. Not as a victory, not as a reward, but as a beginning. Afterward, as people mingled and shook hands and dropped congratulations like confetti, Khalil walked out into the hall alone. No fanfare, no cameras chasing him this time. He found a quiet window that looked out over the city. The same city that once forgot him, now bending just slightly in his direction. The streets below were busy as ever, cars threading through traffic lights, faces turned to phones and sidewalks, unaware. But somewhere out there was a bridge and a pipe and a patch of cold ground that used to be a home. He hadn't been back since the night Rachel found him again, hadn't needed to. Some places you leave not because you hate them, but because they taught you how to go. And as he stood there, taking in the late afternoon light, he caught a glimpse of movement on the street below. Rachel, standing on the sidewalk outside the building, coat pulled close, one hand cradling Eli, the other shielding her eyes as she looked up. She didn't wave. She didn't call his name. She just smiled, soft and proud, like someone who knew exactly what it had cost him to stand where he stood, and who loved him not for what he'd done, but for the quiet strength it took to keep going after it. As the building emptied and the sun dropped lower, Khalil stood there a little longer, letting the warmth soak through the glass. He didn't know what would come next, but he knew this much. You don't need a house to have a heart. You don't need a title to do what's right. And you don't have to be grown to be good. You just have to care. Enough to show up, enough to act, even when no one sees you. Especially then, join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.